All right, cool. All right, hey everybody. So for everyone who doesn't know me, my name is Michael Borchers, right? And as I introduced myself earlier today, I'm a branch chief in Louisville. And so 5 years ago in Louisville, we just had a section, and so we've grown into a branch. And so I became the section chief about 5 years ago. And as we were going through that process, and before I became the section chief, I worked in water management. I was a water manager. And so as I've kind of grown through the ranks, if you will, that's right.
Project just a little bit more hard to hear.
Oh, okay. Oh, all right. Can you hear me? Yeah. So anyway, part of our process for moving to the cloud actually started like 5 years ago before we even knew what the cloud was. So just we started thinking about how we do things and how we process our data and stuff like that, just to be more efficient. And then that kind of led into where we're going for the cloud. So I asked Brandon Colsey and David Wilson to put together this presentation, and it's their presentation. It's all their work. I'm just the one kind of reading it. And so if you ask me detailed questions about what's going on, I'm going to be able to tell you, I know what all the words are, what they mean, but when you put them in these certain sentences, I don't know what that means. So to be real honest, but the overall methodology and the concepts, we decided to do as a team. Louisville became the pilot project for moving to the cloud a couple years ago. And the reasons we did that, one, I like to volunteer us for stuff. But two, our system is fairly, I don't want to say it's generic, but it's kind of the middle of the road. It's not super complex, but it's not super easy. We thought that would provide a good example. You know, if we got Louisville to work, that would probably cover 80% of what everybody else needs. And so that seemed to be a good fit. And then also, we have some extra resources that we could throw at it. So that's kind of how Louisville became, I guess, what's going on here? How we became the pilot for the cloud, if you will. So if anybody does have questions or wants to talk about stuff, interrupt, raise your hand. This is not supposed to be a lecture necessarily, but if we could have some discussion, that'd be fantastic. So we really started thinking about developing our cloud stuff in 2022. And again, the reasonings, the thoughts behind that were Louisville. We had some extra resources. We actually have two IT guys, David and Brandon, who are both pretty good, and we're willing to work on some national projects and keep migrating our stuff and cleaning our stuff up, which was just kind of a process we were doing anyway. And so that made sense. And then, a couple points here. The migration has been an iterative process, right? So we are learning how to do it as we do it, right? So the common way of saying that is we're building the plane as we fly it, which really means we're falling, right? You don't build a plane while you fly it, right? That's false. That's falling. But we are trying to figure out how these processes and how the stuff works. One of the things I think is really interesting and somewhat frustrating about SWMS, right, is that, and just our data systems in general, is that these have been growing since what, like the 70s, when we really started doing some of this stuff, especially in the 80s. And so we have lots of old legacy processes and ways of thinking and ways of doing business. And so trying to make all that stuff work in these new environments is really hard. And so that's a lot of where the complexities are, in my opinion. And we're constantly trying to figure that out. And then a lot of the stuff that Louisville has done, other people will not have to do for a couple of reasons. One, you may not have the processes Louisville does. And two, as we're figuring this stuff out, hopefully we will have better solutions and you won't have to stumble around like we've done in the past. Okay. So when they put this together, I asked David and Brandon to come up with some examples of how long it took and how hard it was, right? Because everybody here is going to have to do some version of this stuff, right? And I wanted people to understand a little bit of what could be expected, or at least how they could budget in their minds the effort that this is going to take. Now, everybody's going to be different. This is going to be the really hard part about this, is because your office is going to be completely different than Louisville's in many ways. And so everything I'm saying has to be taken with this huge grain of salt, and you have to really understand your system. I'm going to ask a question. How many people here really understand their systems in their office? Okay, I don't see any hands. I see a few like these, right? And if you would have asked us 2 years ago, this is what we would have done too, right? So when we switched, actually maybe 4 years ago, when we switched from our previous server to the T7, we sat down and we talked about that process. And David was kind of the guy that was in charge of that. And one of the questions I asked him, I was like, what are all the processes we have? So we listed them all out and we started going through them. I'm like, what's this do? Like, I don't know what any of them do, but I'm asking him, and he's like, I don't know what that does. I don't know what that does. I don't know what that does. I'm like, let's turn them off then. Let's turn them off and see what breaks. And so we did that. I said, what's this? This is Fortran. Let's get rid of it. Let's figure out, let's turn it off. And if something breaks, then let's write a new one. And if it doesn't break, let's just get rid of it. And we had lots of stuff that was producing stuff that no one was using, right? It was important maybe 10, 20 years ago. It's not important today. So we went through everything we did on our servers before we went to the T7. So when we migrated to the T7, we were really clean. And I think that is the most important thing every office needs to do. And that's a real lift, right? That's a really hard thing to do because as everybody some people went like this, and I didn't see anybody go, oh, I really understand my system, right? Because of and I understand that, right? That's not a criticism. That's the reality of the world. You have to understand your system in order to migrate it to the cloud, right? It's not just going to be picking it up and dumping it. Yeah, Jeremy. Yeah.
When did you guys do your naming convention migration? Is it during that process?
So our names were pretty close to the convention that people that came up with anyway. So we just left them. I don't think we really changed a whole bunch of stuff. No, we had that stuff in there already in most cases. Yeah. But that's a great question, right? Because everybody's going to be named. This is a huge issue, is naming conventions, right? And so I remember, I don't know, it was 10 years ago or so, that there was this naming convention PDT went through, right? And they came up with a naming convention. And I always like to say, this is a little sidebar. I always find it really interesting, water management, where we're kind of given a directive from headquarters and everybody goes, yeah, now we're not going to do that, right? I'm one of the guys that used to sit in the back and say that all the time. I'm not doing that. We had a naming convention came out. I'm like, we're not changing. We're not doing that. That's a lot of work. We're not doing it. And then like 2 years later, they're like, we're getting rid of that naming convention. I'm like, that's why we didn't do it. So there's a lot of reasons people are hesitant to change stuff. And that's a great example of it, right? But I'm telling you, you got to change some of the stuff now, right? This is almost coming into a do or die situation. But we went through every process and cleaned that up. And that was a lot of work. That took several years for that to actually really work. And I think because we did that, we're in a much better position now to move forward in the cloud. One, because we cleaned up our stuff. And two, we really understand our system now. And we got rid of all of the dumb overhead stuff that was running that produced something, but we didn't even know what it was. Certainly didn't look at it, and getting rid of all that garbage and cleaning that up was a huge, huge benefit for us. And then we changed everything as much as possible to CCP, and getting into that normal enterprise, I shouldn't say normal, the new enterprise way of doing stuff. And most of the things that you do in your office can be done in this enterprise system. Maybe not everything, right? But most of the stuff we can do. And sometimes it requires you to rethink about how you're doing things, right? You don't have to do stuff the exact same way you've been doing it for 20, 30 years. Think about what you need and come up with new processes if that's better and more efficient. And that's just a fact of life. You cannot keep things old, right? Like if you have Fortran code, how many people have Fortran code on their server right now? Let's see the hands. Let's see your Fortran. So yeah, and that stuff's there and it works, right? So you hate to get rid of something that works, but it's time.
Something like Fortran, is that an ATC doing intervention for the problem? Like that's a problem that exists anywhere.
Well,
somebody can help them.
So the problem with that is because this Fortran code is doing something that's really unique, nobody's going to know how to fix that unless you take a deep dive and really get into it. And quite honestly, I believe that that's the district's responsibility. It's not HEC's responsibility. Now, HEC can provide help. That's what they're there for, as can everybody in this room, right? The great thing about coming to this workshop should be when you go home and have problems, you know what 30 people to call for help. I'm not one of them, right? But everyone else, the person you're sitting next to, unless they're in your office, but expand that network to get more help. But that's the problem. HEC can't fix this stuff. Right. So, okay. So we cleaned up our stuff for a T7. And then we had this thing happen, right, where COVID hit. And I remember I was talking to the water management team because I just become a supervisor. I just became the section chief. I've been section chief for like 6 months when COVID hit. My first 6 months were really rough as a section chief. We had 3 reservoirs taken away from us, which is the first time that's like ever happened, and especially in Louisville. And it's really been a long time since that happened. And I thought, wow, I'm doing such a great job. They took away 3 of our reservoirs. And then COVID hit. And so when COVID hit, we had a meeting and I told everybody, we have to be able to work fully remote. And that was not ever a goal of the water management office. Had never been a goal. So we don't work weekends. A lot of offices are staffed 7 days a week. We are not. We're staffed 5 days a week. But during flooding, we staff 7 days. So the way that worked is we would have to have one person drive into the office and kick off some reports and run some processes on the server that were probably written in, I don't know, Abacus to get into work because you couldn't do it remotely. And when I was in water management, I was always like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in a litany of dumb things that we do at the Corps. How can we have a system based on networked computers that somebody has to go in and manually run? But that was our system. And it'd been that way for, I don't know, probably 30 years. And there's no real drive to change it until COVID happened. And at that point, I mean, the water management team was trying to figure out where they could meet to do this stuff in person rather than figuring out how to fix the problem. And I'm like, no, we're not doing that. We will shut everything down before we figure out a new location to meet, because our building got shut down, right? They weren't letting people in. Louisville had a lot of problems going on in COVID. We had civil unrest going on. We had COVID. We had all these issues. Nobody wanted to come into the office. And so we went through and we figured out all the stuff that we needed to do to make these processes work. So what was that? CAVI-based and T7-based scripts for upward reporting. So that was our big deal, was the upward reporting had to be kicked off locally. Network-based applications were developed to facilitate viewing, signing, and archiving of digital reports. So we have these things, our daily lake bulletins. We have them going back to the 50s. Every day since 1950, we have a piece of paper for a lake record. How many people have stuff like that? Yeah. We were always telling everybody, we need this much storage space because we have to keep those paper records. And people would be like, that's dumb. And I'm like, yes, it is, but that's where we're at. So we figured out how to do this electronically. Our biggest problem with doing them electronically, sometimes they have handwritten notes on them, right? And so we got to a point where we could add notes and do things like this, digitally. It's not that hard, right? That was not that hard to do. You just needed a reason to do it. And so this was the reason. So that really helped kick us off into thinking about how can we do these things more efficiently and do them better. As engineers, that is in my opinion, that is the biggest thing that we need to do, is always look at what we're doing and how can we do it better, right? Don't throw away something because it's old, but don't keep it because it's the way you've always done stuff.
So Michael, are those now scripts in the cabin and they're in that watershed generate report?
Yeah, so it's between the CABI and then in the general T7 then as well. So you will kick off a thing in the CABI and it puts the report together and then it bundles it all together in the T7. And then it sends that to our division office, and who knows what they do with it, because those guys are, yeah, they do things. That's a good way of putting it. They do things. And then our data sources, right? So there are new data sources out there. So we migrated to especially our gridded precip data. We modified our extracts to retrieve gridded data from Cumulus rather than from the T7. How many people are using Cumulus, like really using it? How many people aren't? Let's ask that question. I see people who didn't raise their hand either way. This is active participation time.
If their answer is, I don't know, that's a bad sign.
Well, that's true. How many people don't know? If you would ask me like a week ago, I would have raised my hand on that one before I read this. Think about how that stuff works, right? Update to the newest stuff, right? There is hesitation, and I totally understand the hesitation to be the first one because you want to get the teething problems fixed, right? You want to have it be solid and have a few people use it before you guys jump in. That's perfectly understandable, especially for production work. This is production work. It has to be done. Totally get that. Guess what? We're at that point. It's time to jump on the board. Get on the bus, right? Don't get left behind completely, because if you're scrambling when your T7 is dying, you're going to have real problems. So anyway, so we did that. So we did some custom extract scripts to implement local caching of gridded data. So the way we run our models is we do what I like to call the poor person's soil moisture accounting process. So we do a 2-month look back. And so within Cumulus, we were having problems being able to do a 2-month look back, getting all that data together. So we developed some custom caching processes so that we could bring that data in and reuse it, and we wouldn't have to be downloading it all the time. The reason we do that is because when we do a calibration, so how many people here actually run models that aren't just the IT people? Okay, so how many people keep your hands up, keep your hands up. All right, how many people, lower your hands if you love calibrating HMS? I see. Wow, love it. You guys really like calibrating your HMS models? Yeah, lower people, everybody who had their hands up originally should still have their hands up, unless you're a freak, right? So the point being, calibrating HMS is really difficult, right? It takes a lot of time, it's tedious. I hated it. I'm like the worst person at it. I'd be like, it's close enough. It's close enough. The hydrographs like in a different week. It's close enough. It still works. What we ended up doing is with that 2-month look back, we were able to we would do a calibration over an entire year, and it's not super good, but it's good enough for what we were doing. So we do a calibration every year, and then we can adjust a few parameters, and that works pretty well for us. That's why we have to have that 2-month look back to get the moisture in the system, so everything's balanced out. And that works real well for us. So we developed those things, and then we modified extract list to retrieve time series data from the SWIMI test database rather than a local SWIMS database. That's pretty simple, right? You just change your extract list. So we're actually pulling stuff from the cloud. So let's see, what was it? Not this last surge, but the surge before. How many people were at the surge? Not this most recent one, but the one before. Okay, wasn't that an exciting moment when we ran a model? Louisville ran a model from the cloud. That was amazing, right? That blew my mind. Well, all we did is change our extract list. There's no difference. So Louisville is populating data into SWIMI, but it's still being processed on our T7. So it's not really it's in the cloud and we can pull it down, and we've demonstrated we can do that. There's not really a lot of overhead or time lost on that, but getting that data in there we're still working on that. But we'll do that. Now, we don't do that every day, honestly. We just play with that. We test it every once in a while to make sure it's still working, but we still use our local data source because that's what we use. We haven't switched yet. So we want to be clear on that. Oh, and so let me go back here real quick. So yeah, so for the T7 cleanup, we thought that was a 4 out of 5 for time. I think it's more of a 5 out of 5. That took us a long time. And the expertise was 4 out of 5, right? So that took a couple of guys, Brandon and David, to go through everything we did and figure it out. And that took some doing. Yeah. And it's out of 5, right? So 4 out of 5 that's pretty severe. That took a lot of time. So don't underestimate that ever. Now, your system might only be a 1 because it's completely different. Who knows? But that's the dangerous part. No one knows. So dive into that. Look at that stuff. And then, figure it out. None of this stuff, when I say none of this stuff should be that hard. I can't do any of it, right? But that's not what I focused on, right? So it shouldn't be that none of this stuff should be super, super hard. It's really tricky, but it's not, I like to say we're not landing rockets on comets here, right? This stuff is doable and should be understandable. So anyway, that was a 4 out of 5. Our COVID telework updates, that 3 out of 5, 4 out of 5, 4 out of 5, because it took customizing a lot of stuff. So that we rebuilt a lot of stuff from scratch. And so again, we had the expertise to do that. And then the CAVI model data sources, 2 out of 5, and expertise 1 out of 5. Basically, you're just modifying your extract list. And so that was really pretty easy. Like I could even do that. And so again, that worked out okay. All right. Then local Python CDA library. Okay, that's one of the sentences. I know all the words, but I don't know what it means when you put them all together. Okay. So prior development, I'm just going to read some of the stuff to you. So I hate it when people read slides, but I'm going to do that a little bit here. Prior to the development of SWMS Python, we developed an LRL Python library for our CDA access, right? So HEC is doing all their little HEC thingies over there, right? This is going to sound like I'm criticizing HEC. I'm not. Well, maybe I'm a little bit. But they're doing all this stuff over here, right? And we're like, okay, we got to get this stuff done. So we wrote our own libraries. In that time, there's now new libraries have been written. So you don't have to do that. But we did. And that's sometimes there's a cost of being in the front, being the first one. But it also gave us some good experience. And then our library, we still use it because it has some stuff in it we really like.
So you didn't redo it then to SWMS Python after it came out?
No. That's a really good question. Yeah, we're not gonna, but we could, and we probably should. We probably should. Yeah, and then okay, this I'm not sure what this means. Leverage Python primitive types, namely dictionaries, okay, to allow quick and easy retrieval of any time series for a given timestamp. Who knows what that means? Huh? Yeah, no, I know. I'm being somewhat facetious here, Fawaz. Come on, stay with the program. But so so we did that. We supported time, format, times. Supported time, format, time zone, interval conversions. And we use this to migrate existing scripts away from DB API and towards a more cloud-ready approach. Right? Everything we're doing is trying to get it ready for the cloud. Everything we do in our office is focused on getting to the cloud. Right, in the water management team, as far as any of the IT work, and then we will transition towards SWMS Python as development continues and our use cases become supported. So again, everything isn't ready. As stuff becomes ready, we switch stuff over, and we're kind of that guinea pig. So something gets turned on, we jump in there, we start playing with it, and then we're like, hey Jeff, this isn't working. Your LDM tool is, Hocus Pocus isn't working. Please fix it. And then that's what happens. He's not paying attention to me, so it's fine. Yeah. So we do those kind of things. So doing this stuff, time 2 out of 5, expertise 3 out of 5. It's getting a little bit more complicated, but didn't take a lot of time if you had that expertise. All right, reports. So I always have found this really interesting about SWMS, that there's not really a good report generator that's ever been built into SWMS. Right? To me, and this is I always think it's funny, right? The things as a water manager that I do or did is I always thought not in flow out of a reservoir. I thought of gate openings, and I always do upward reporting. In fact, the only reason I do a lot of the stuff I do is I got to report it up to our division office so they can do whatever they do, right? So we had to write a bunch of stuff or figure out how to do reports, and so. We also work with other dam safety folks, and so they have a lot of piezometers in different dams, and so we interfaced with that, and so we came up with a system that would interface with their Midas system. Yes.
Dam safety data in SWMS.
I'm sorry.
Do you need the dam safety piezometer
in our SWMS database? No. That data is not in there, but we interface with it sometimes. But we want to actually make sure that the pertinent data right from our database is getting into that database is really what we're doing, migrating that stuff out. And so we work a lot with our dam safety folks. Does anybody else do that? Does anybody else besides Jeremy? Okay, all right, okay, just a couple people. So, you know, the other thing that I think is really important or really interesting about water management is, you know, when I started as a water manager, the water managers all kind of sat in a little corner by themselves. They kept their heads down there, talked to anybody. I mean, they might talk to them, but not about water management, right? They definitely did not want to be noticed. You know, some offices like Fort Worth, they go behind the door and they lock it, right? I mean, I kind of envied that at one point, right? But now we have a different view in Louisville, in that we want water management to be involved in everything that's going on that has to do with a dam or a river or any sort of system, which is like everything we do civil works, right? We have all the data, we have models that we can simulate everything for a watershed, and so we need to be involved. And so that's one reason why we're getting more involved with our dam safety folks, our levee safety, all these others. Yeah. What did they think of that? So that's kind of interesting. So a lot of the stuff changed when I became the section chief, and I act a lot differently than the other section chiefs in Louisville. And so it was a bit of an adjustment for lots of people, but I think it's worked really well. And, you know, and I'm like, you know, water management needs to be involved in all of these decisions. And we still struggle with that sometimes because a lot of people don't think water management's that important. But, you know, I did talk to our risk people, the people that are doing risk analysis, you know, through, you know, the risk cadres or the RMC, MMC work, you know, some of the stuff that, you know, new stuff that's coming out with FFRD and these kind of things. We try to at least bring in, Louisville's tied into all that stuff. And we try to have, well, partially because I came from a water management background, we think in those terms at my level. And so we try to focus that kind of thinking into a lot of the stuff that we did, right? Which makes sense, right? As water managers, we're dealing with the systems in real time as they're really doing things. We're not coming up with, oh, you know, we think the, you know, 0.00000000001% chance exceedance interval thing, whatever is going to do this. We're dealing with what's happening today or tomorrow. And I find that that gives you a much more practical engineering focus, right? I just had a meeting with some of the people at the RMC, and they're talking about how, I'm sorry, I'm going to go way over because I'm telling the stories now, but they're like trying to fine tune to figure out the differences between these dams that have, they're essentially the same risk score. And they're trying to figure out which one's really worse or not. I'm like, why does it matter? If they have the same score, you know, yeah, you can say one has a, you know, a 4 versus a 4.00001. That to me is the same. A 4.1 and a 4 is the same. Right? So a lot of the eggheady engineers, they get wrapped around the axle on these really small, little itty bitty details, right? And I always like to say, you know, hey, you know, when they built this dam, they didn't have calculators, right? Think about that. How many people have heard me say that before? I say that a lot, right? Because I'm fascinated by that. When we built these projects, all these networks, all the stuff that we have, most of our infrastructure was built before we had calculators. Now we're doing our analysis with these crazy computers, doing multiple millions of calculations to figure out whether it's good or not. Like the old school engineers, they really thought about what was the guiding principle, the most important calculation, and then they would do that calculation. I'm sorry, I'm getting off here a little bit. So anyway, so that, yeah, so we work with dam safety. Form 85. Basically, again, it's a form we sent up. That's what we send to our division office. We had to figure out how to package all that stuff up. And then we came up with a flood control project dashboard. So we have, you know, Python scripts to generate plots and stuff. We want to eventually transition that to a web-based framework, eliminating the need for external scripts. We are trying to get rid of every script we can. Scripts are our enemies. We hate them. All right. CWMS database, one source of truth. So I'm really excited about actually having a water management enterprise database, right? So instead of Louisville having a database and Nashville having a database and Huntington having a database and Albuquerque having a database and Wilmington having all these different databases around the world, we have one. And that way anybody can pull that data out from anywhere, right? That's really cool. It should be, you know, processed to the same standards. It all should be much more seamless and better, easier to use. As a water manager, I found myself going to the USGS more often than to our own database to pull information. How many people do that? So I found that to be really easier because it was easier to access. It was smooth. I mean, the USGS has its issues too, don't get me wrong, but in many ways it was better. And that's how we always truthed our data, right? So this is something I was really bad at too. I hated doing this. They'd be like, oh, you got to QC your data. So how we did that is we would put our data up and we put the GS data up and we'd see which one, we see anytime it's different, we copy the GS stuff into ours. I'm like, why don't we just bring in the GS stuff? Why do we do this whole process? And I fought for that for years. Finally, I got that to happen. So we do that. We ingest the GS stuff, which is smart, right? Why would we mess with all the decodes and the satellite transmissions and all that junk? This is my perspective, right? This is not the course perspective. This is my perspective. All that stuff when we paid the GS to do it, right? And we give them millions of dollars a year as an agency to do that stuff for us. So in Louisville, we're like, wow, we'll just take their stuff. Now we still bring in the stuff, right? We still bring in our things, we'll process it with decodes and stuff because sometimes there is a problem. We definitely have that, the GS, the stuff that we use most of. So anyway, yeah, so we removed our legacy DSS files and migrated data and associated processes to SWIM CDA, right? So that's the big one, right? You got to get with the program, get updated. Ensure that all used archival data is available in the SWIMS database. Now, when I first saw that line, I'm like, all of our data is in the SWIMS database? And Dave was like, oh, yeah. I said, even the stuff from the 60s? Oh, well, no. How about the stuff from the 80s? No. How about the stuff from 2000? Well, no. So we still have some work to do, is getting a lot of that stuff in there. But the goal is to have every piece of data we would ever have in that database, right? So when I talked about how we had those paper forms from the 50s, we're going to find some poor co-op student, intern, whoever to scan all that in and get that electronic and get it in the database.
So we hired that person for everyone.
Well, I know. You're responsible to find your own interns, right? Yeah.
Hired somebody to do the scanning part.
Yeah, and so
That's an easy contract, but for real.
The scanning part, we have people in their handwriting, they're outside the box.
yeah, and it's going to be real tricky in how we handle all that stuff because it is. When we do something, we're looking back, we go back to those paper copies and you look at it, and somebody will write, oh, fish spawn, so we did this. And they just scratched it on the piece of paper, right? That was fine in the 60s. But even in the 80s, we shouldn't have been doing that, right? And we were doing that up until about 4 years ago in Louisville. Maybe a little bit longer, maybe 7 years ago, is when we kind of stopped doing that stuff. We started doing it all digital. And so, yeah, that's a big thing. So getting all that data in there's going to be big. So this is a little bit fuzzy. But then we also try to eliminate all sources of duplicate data. So there's a little bit of a theme. It's cleaning up our systems, cleaning up our processes, making it as simple and as efficient as possible, right? And that should be our goal anyway, whether we're moving to the cloud or not. Now, I know you're not going to do it. I wouldn't have done it unless this was happening. So it's a good thing that we're doing it. And then updated all data dissemination reporting products to pull data from the SWIMS database using CDA. Again, going to the enterprise solution, that enterprise system to do everything. Time 3 out of 5, experience 2 out of 5. So took some time, and it's not done. So it's maybe at 8 out of 5, to be honest. Time wise, expertise, it shouldn't be that hard. All right, public website overhaul. So we're doing that too. We're changing all of our website stuff. We're working a little bit with Diana Hambali and some of the other people, and we're really trying to think about how we want our data to be presented. We're doing stuff with the 21st Century Act, and we're redoing everything that we have, right? So where was it? We had this is what our website used to look like, right? And does that look like a form that you just would have printed out?
It's like a gun.
Yeah, it is. It looks like the government, which is a nice way of saying it looks poopy, right? This is exactly what we had on our little clipboards, right? That we printed out, and then somebody scanned that and put that in here, and then, yeah, I mean, that's exactly what that is. And so now it kind of looks more like this. And so we're moving things better, we're moving forward, we're making it more modern, And that is what we need to be doing, irregardless of moving to the cloud. This, I was always so frustrated when I came to work as an engineer and went to the Corps, sat in water management, and they gave me all this paper. All this paper. And I'm like, what? I also have a computer. Why do I have paper and a computer? Right. And so it's so much nicer as we migrate to the early 2000s. So what was the time on that one? 3 out of 5 expertise, 3 out of 5. The beautiful thing about this, there's the web PDT that's out there helping people. You know, we don't want to be web people, right? Louisville doesn't want to have a web team. We don't want to do that. So we're trying to figure out, we have to be a little bit. So we're trying to figure out how to get rid of that stuff. So again, trim the fat, simplify, consolidate, make better.
Don't already complete that.
Mostly.
So is that 3 to 5 per time, maybe? I feel like that time can't be.
Could be, depends on what you have. You know, how sophisticated your websites are. I mean,
And whether you want to replicate everything you have now or let it be changed to something new. If officers are dead set that we need this plot to look this way for some gibberish reason, then you're probably gonna have no problem.
Yeah.
You can accept any standard footage.
Yeah. This is what we had. Literally was this. If you looked at a plot, it was a DSS plot that was a PDF. Boom, that was it. That's what our webpage was. It was pretty garbagey. So project data entry form. This is kind of a big one. And you see time is 4 out of 5, expertise is 4 out of 5. So one of our biggest hurdles is that, so as water managers, we think in gate settings, right? We think in real time. And then we also think about how do we get our project data into our systems, right? This always found this was funny with AGC because they never thought that was a big deal. I'm not sure they still think that's a big deal, right? That the data from the lakes has to get into our system. There's no simple way to do that because there's no program that does that. So we wrote one. Actually, we've written like 8 of them, right? And I'm sure every office has a system, right? How many people put their data from their lakes into their database? Everybody should be raising their hand here, right? Everybody should have their hand up. I'm seeing people not raising their hand. This is the participation point, right? You know, if you're not doing that, what are you doing? What's your job, right? So we're trying to do it in a way that the lake operators, right? So we get our information is hand entered by lake operators, right? People at the lakes, at the projects. They go out, they measure stuff, they look at stuff, they do their job, and they type it in, and that gets sent to us. The way that used to work when I first started the Corps, I've been with the Corps for 15 years. They sent us a fax, right? They sent us a fax and we would hand jam that stuff in. Then it went to an email and we would hand jam that stuff in. And now we've got it to like this web app that we're really customizing and making it much simpler for them and much simpler for us. We've built this with modularity in mind so other people can have this. But a lot of people's systems are really unique, like the way our gate settings are at each reservoir. None of our reservoirs have, well, I shouldn't say none of them, but a lot of our reservoirs have different sorts of gates, right? So the data entry form is custom to each reservoir, and each system's going to be a little different. So, but as this is wrapped up and prettied up and cleaned up, just saying, we'll make it available for everyone else. Yeah.
Is the project plans in settings, objects?
So the stuff we get from the lake personnel, they're putting in gate settings. We're at 8/10 or we're at 1/10 or whatever. And so we get that and that gets put into our database that way. And then we also have, I'm sorry, so what was the other, so some of it's hand jammed in there. They're putting it in at the settings. And then we're pulling stuff. I'm not sure I'm answering your question here.
I'm just wondering if it's going to the same options as the Reggie tools are putting.
That's a question I'll have to ask Brandon or David.
I don't think any of our options on Brandon.
I think there is a time series.
Yeah, there you go. It's a time series.
Yeah, is that app going to be an enterprise tool that each office just configures some JSON for? Like this is something everyone in the district needs.
Yeah.
ATC is making this an enterprise app.
No,
We're gonna take yours to turn into.
I mean, I don't know if they're gonna do that or not,
Oh,
but we've done this.
Yeah,
I'll take it.
it's the issue of every, just like you said, every project is custom.
Yeah, but it
So it will be
can't.
available for you to grab and edit. It's
So,
not necessarily
yeah.
for-
So we will make this available, right? And we're happy to do that. We've built it to do that. But we're not customer support, right? Yeah. Cool.
We talked about this in our office, but we have not been told yes or no that this is an acceptable way for project data entry. So is a web app okay? Path forward, or what we have now, is that still okay? We just don't know if it's okay. Maybe that's time. Key exchange. Jeff,
So it-
sum up the way that we have project data right now, how it goes from the operator spreadsheet. You just key exchange. Probably good.
First of all, I think this section has to be installed.
List of, oh,
no, it's a web app, but it'll have keycloak and authorization, so you have to have that part of it. Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
I said just told it that was, I've not been told until now that this was gonna be acceptable moving forward. But also,
I'm saying it's gonna be acceptable.
but also is what we're doing now, is it gonna be okay to do what's currently?
So the bottom one, what it looks like an Excel sheet,
Right.
and it's converted into a web app.
Yeah.
So the Excel sheet, probably not, you're not gonna be able to do that.
Yeah.
The web app.
But like Austin, I think what you gotta do, it won't get served. And
Right.
like that won't exist. I think what you're doing now can't.
Sorry, I'm not sure.
And so again, time, 4 out of 5, expertise, 4 out of 5. So it's a pretty big lift right here, right? So hopefully though, that, there'll be some tools that are made that people can then, leverage and utilize and help move forward with them.
And this, I know you can't answer for Michael, but for the agency folks, if all the districts are gonna need that app, that means some of them are gonna be getting into the app design business where they don't want anything to do with that. Some people.
Yes.
I don't wanna have to design that.
And
Guess what?
And for full-on web app design, is that where I certification stuff are gonna come in? Which is another thing that some offices are just done with forever.
So I think so we're going to a whole new world, right? Whole new paradigm. And we don't know what that world looks like yet, right? It's kind of like, we've sent some probes out and we've looked at it and we're like, oh, well, we think there's air there. We think we can live there. We know we can't, right? We know that, but we don't know exactly how. And so I think what we're going to have happen is we're going to end up having small clusters of people, teams, right, to help with this kind of stuff. I think it's going to be the natural the natural evolution of how this stuff has to happen, because it is going to be unreasonable for every office to have, a web person and a person who can develop these apps and do all the stuff. There's going to have to be some sort of small group of people that can do that stuff, right? We're also finding lots of offices are having trouble hiring IT folks, right? Because let's face it, the core doesn't pay that much compared to private industry, although private industry seems like it's becoming less and less desirable right now. So I do think we're getting some really talented people in it, but all that stuff remains to be seen how it's going to be worked out. I'm advocating, these national teams for different things, lots of different things, having like a model team, an IT team, a cloud team, something like that. But we're not sure what that's going to look like. So we're talking about that. We're trying to figure out what that would be. But the idea would be, yes, in my opinion, I think what's going to happen, and you guys can say this is what Michael thinks. Don't say this is what Michael says is going to happen, but you can say this is what I think. So, we have this helping the field team going out, helping people with modeling, right? I think we're going to have something like that for the cloud migration, where people are going to go help offices get converted. But if you don't have that first step done, where your system's clean, no one can help you, right? If you don't have your system clean and efficient, no one's going to be able to jump in there and help you because it's going to take way too long. And so those are the big steps I think that people need to do. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see. Now, of course, you guys can call us and we'll certainly help you out for free. Maybe we'll see. we'll work something out. And then you get USGS data retrieval. As I said already, we really rely and leverage that USGS data. So there's this guy, kind of an older, kind of a dinosaur person, wrote the script to bring in USGS information, right? Does people know who I'm talking about?
Yeah.
That's Mr. Perryman back there, right? So that's a big deal to bring that data in. And so, we're figuring out how to do that in the new environment and put it into the SWMS database, or I'm sorry, the cloud database or the SWMS database. And so, we're bringing stuff into our T7, processing it and sending it up to SWIBI. So that's how we're doing it right now. When the T7 gets shut off, that will break. So Corel and HEC are working on this process just to make sure that they can run in the cloud. Time took 3 out of 5. Expertise, it's pretty simple, 1 out of 5. And then LPMS data ingestion. So LPMS is a lock performance monitoring system. So we have the Ohio River, which is one of the largest navigable waterways in the world, both in its size and its amount of traffic that it sees. And so we have all this information about the locks. And we need that in our database because we are now becoming more and more responsible for the operation of the Ohio River, especially during low flow operations. Also with other things that are going on, we need to be able to access that information as far as we have a new lock and dam in the lower Ohio. It's the lowest point on the Mississippi waterway. And in order to operate that, we need to understand the system a little bit more than we have in the past. So we're ingesting that information. And so that took us, and so lots of people, like lots of offices have these little one-offs, right? Data that they bring in that nobody else does, right? So I'm of the opinion that we need to make sure 80% of the data works for everybody. And then if you have something that's a one-off, you really need to think about how that works yourself. And so you can get help, but it's not like that's going to be like Louisville doesn't care if Nashville has some little, esoteric data thing that they bring in. That's, now we'll work together, but that's kind of where we're at. And this is kind of one of those things. And so, we went through all this stuff to make it work. I'll let you read it yourself, but being able to figure this stuff out is important for somebody to be able to do. 2 out of 5 expertise, 3 out of 5. So, according to Brandon and David, not super hard. But again, I don't know. It's magic.
And do you know if they said that they're setting that up to do all the LPMS or just stuff that Google?
So we'll work with everything, I think. Yeah.
I mean, because like LPMS stuff is pretty good. Right?
Yeah, it's all the stuff that's in
It's
SWIBI.
already-
Yeah. And so this is what's kind of amazing, right? All the stuff that we deal with is in the cloud. Everything but water management, right? And if you look at like the core, we've got like LPMS is there, all the GIS work stuff is going there, dam safety is already there. We are the last people to get to the cloud, which is kind of ironic because water management was the first group of engineers in the core to get computers. We were at the cutting edge of technology for a long time in the beginning of all this stuff, and now we're kind of bringing up the rear. And so it's kind of interesting.
So it only occurred to me right now, we're talking about LPMS and then the data stuff. That's all entered data by lock and dam operators. They maintain would be somehow. So that tool exists and you guys have a tool. And there's definitely an enterprise tool for getting manual entered data from the field from every random unit on every lock.
The locks are a little more simple as far as their configuration typically, but yeah.
Yeah, I think they have more standard stuff they send in. But there's tools out there that should be able to get that into SWIBI for everybody.
For sure.
And we want you guys, like, so we don't use it. The data we get comes from the district. They all have water management. I don't personally care about the field data, but they all need the field data so that they can send it to me so we can do our super magic on it.
super magic means screwing it all up. Yeah, sure.
For your LPMS integration, are you consuming blockages? Swings?
Sorta. So, so we're more looking at what like the flows are and the settings of their gates, but that information is there. But we're more concerned, we don't really care how many boats go through in an hour. That doesn't mean anything to us, but we're concerned with the flows and how they're changing in the stages within the lock.
So you got, okay. I mean, whoever's hopefully big one. I don't know. Like most of our stuff, I don't think anybody's ever locking, but it's in there. Just like,
Yeah.
And all that, there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So and we really don't even want to be involved with the Ohio River, but we're kind of having to. And so we're really just concerned with the flows and the stages. So, yeah. And then so OpenDCS, CCP, I'll let you guys read this stuff. But, we're again working with HEC to make this stuff happen. And again, the idea is we'll hopefully have lessons learned that we can transfer to everybody here. And then what do we still need to do? So this is almost, I'm almost done here. I know I'm gonna be taking a long time here. So we still need to do cloud-based LDM and Airflow integration. Still need to figure out some stuff with the web hosting. OpenDCS CCP, that's a pretty big thing that still has to happen. CDA cloud support Swims View. Who's in charge of Swims View? Oh my God, it's never gonna work, is it? No, I knew he was in charge. So the production database of Swibby, there's still stuff needs to be done there. Fixes to Keycloak, and static report generation, RepGen, Python, and possibly Airflow. So when it comes down to it, right, we need to be able to work and do our jobs effectively and efficiently. And so, we're hopefully that will come fairly soon. Lots of progress is being made. There's lots of people working on it. We're really appreciative and supportive and really happy. Things are taking longer than they should, or not than they should. It is longer than they should, but certainly longer than we thought. But we are making some real progress. Jeremy, did you have your hand up? No. Okay. Good. Right. And closing thoughts. Okay. Presentation is intended to highlight big picture of Louisville's transition to the cloud. Just some ideas and concepts that we've been thinking about working on. Much of the migration process is dealing with data and processes that fall through the cracks. Prepare to get a little bit creative, right? So if you have a system that's been Frankensteined since the 80s, right? Which everybody here probably has some version of that. It's going to take a creative solution to make that work in a highly restricted area. Because when you go to the cloud, you're not going to be able to just write up some little script or some little cron job or something. Oh, done. You can't do that. You're going to have to be able to use enterprise tools, right? That's just the way it's going to be. And so make sure you get your systems cleaned up as best you can. And this I think is really good. While our experience likely represents a good baseline, every district will have its own specific problems and needs, right? Again, your Frankenstein system is your Frankenstein system. Think about how to clean that up, get it going, make it better, and be prepared to have stuff. I mean, how many people here are prepared for stuff to break? Because it breaks all the time, right? So this, yeah. So be prepared for those kind of challenges going in the future. And then don't be afraid to ask for help. There's a lot of people that are working on this and some really smart people, and they're all really helpful. Right. And so I'm really excited to see these kind of workshops going on. Right. And learn the network, get your network of people here for support. So I'm a big advocate of the field supporting itself. We need to do that. Right. We cannot rely on HEC to support us. We cannot rely on Corral to support us. It's just, they don't have those resources. So we have to do this ourselves. So as you learn something, get involved and help other people out. That's all I have. Any questions? Yeah. Yeah.
How do they plan to migrate their current process? So, I mean, this is such an important element web service, USGS. Well, we're in. So I'm just wondering what's going to be done.
So,
Seems like everyone's doing their own thing.
Yep.
SWD's doing the veggie thing. I'm just curious what everyone else is
I think that's a really good question. I don't think there's a good answer to it.
Usually like tracking, not how to, like not how to get working the person mock and another gear, but it's just tracking whether her date.
Yeah, you date setting in your rights. It's how you tracking the dates, date release, spillway. Release. Yeah, you know, it's just that time. Answers change.
Oh, logging your, a lot of waiting for operations.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that information really essentially comes from our projects, right? So in Louisville, right, we're developing that tool so that they can put that information in and it can get into our database that way.
That's include pre-pack, like.
Yeah, there's some boxes to put in, you know, hey, we did this because of this or whatever.
So they answer like, even funds. How are you carrying that 500 that's being forward to the next stage?
So the next time there'd be a gate change, there'd be a new entry and you just have to look at it. Yes, yeah.
I'm just curious what this organization.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a really good question because it is kind of ironic, I think, right? It's kind of funny. Everybody makes gate changes, right? Everybody has gates on their reservoirs, and we don't have a really good way of handling that information, right?
I would bet the most often. It's not part of model, it's not part of the modeling, but it's not necessarily a part of swim, so that might be tricky.
Isn't it necessary to forecast?
After they close, then it's a regular time series in the swims and some have to calculate those that are go away and it's conduit based on rate of depth.
Yep.
So we can-
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I think again, I don't know that, yeah, it's something I would imagine, it's. Like HMS doesn't require us to explain something. Here.
So it is interesting, right? So when we talk to our lake personnel, they don't understand flow. They understand gate settings. When we talk to people at the lock and dams, they understand stage or, you know, whatever datum that they're using, the elevation. And so, you know, you talk to somebody at the Ohio River, they'll be like, yeah, it's 12.3. That's not the depth. That's just the marking on one gauge, right? And so its datum is whatever. And the next gauge downstream, its datum's completely different. And so it might be at 18.4. You know, so, but that's what they understand and they all know that. Our lakes, you know, it's 0.3, 0.8. It's not 350 CFS.
I'm gonna bring off from like the last, it doesn't really matter for this group exactly, but like your last model one, your forecast really for the next however many days. Right now, hopefully offices post that back to Oracle, so it's sitting in there as however you name your releases. Eventually, we're gonna have to because NMC can start tracking it, so it's not gonna track what you actually anywhere. But that would be offhand. That's how it. But that's just cheap also, totally also forecast. I don't know if that would cover, outlet by outlet. But
So
that's
the-
what
yeah.
We would post that stuff back to Oracle.
Yeah, so I mean, and so this is where we have a lot of homegrown solutions, right, for these needs. And it's good to have some discussions on this as a collective to say, you know, this is what we need, right? And there are avenues to do that. We just need to make sure that those messages are getting out there and getting pushed. So hopefully we can, you know, make some traction. But yeah, it will be interesting to see how all that works, which is not a great answer.
I guess the next question is, what is our reporting software? I hear you want to use CBA, JavaScript, and web-based and stuff. But I don't know if all the report schemes do that. You know, one thing I think of is archiving your morning stuff. Is that going to be necessary? Because if you move to the interactive with JavaScript and stuff, you won't be able to archive your reports. You know what I mean? And how will you? It's just a record of why we did what we did. When that report started, Well, the thing is though, but then the data changes. And then that report is the versioning the last week.
The web team is working on that, and they're working with WebGen or iText. Trying to figure out that solution, but I didn't even work on that.
Okay.
Weren't they talking about they were gonna timestamp it?
Yeah, so I mean, we have to have like a daily record of what we're doing, right? And that has to be available for someone to look at, right? And before, yeah, absolutely. And so the way we do that now, or let's say, 6 years ago, we printed a piece of paper and you wrote by hand on that. Now we're doing it electronically, but it's like a PDF, right? So it's really still just a piece of paper. But we're moving into a more digital format now. Definitely. So
That type of formats, that's a possibility, or do it by jobs?
I don't know.
That's what Daniel Osborne is heading that team. So, I think I just want to ask, how many people in this room are part of the web development people or joined the web development? Have you heard any updates from Daniel on?
I know where you can rep gen. And I think iText is also going to be
There's
the acceptable PDF.
an issue with iText is
License?
licensing. So he's working that part out to make sure we don't get hit with a bill. We start using it and then all of a sudden charged. The other issue with that is anything we publish via PDF has to be 508 compliant. And as of right now, there's no automated way to do that. Someone would have to sit down and run through all those steps to make it 508 compliant, so a PDF can get posted to the website, to our websites. And that's a big deal because there's a dollar amount fine per PDF if you get caught with that. So from the Congress, there's a congressional mandate that any PDF posted by a government site has to be 508 compliant along with a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah. So cool. Awesome. Well, hey, I appreciate everyone listening. I want to give a shout out here just for a second to Brandon Holsey and David Wilson. They're the guys doing all this work. They're heavily involved with a lot of the national teams. They're really doing really tremendous work. And, this is their presentation. It's not mine. I want everyone to know that. If it's not painfully obvious, I want to make sure that you guys know that they're the ones doing it. But the other thing I want to say is if you're not involved in these national teams, get involved, right? That's how you can, one, learn, and how you can make sure your voice is getting heard at some level with things that are happening. And so, more involvement your office has, the better it's going to be for you guys in the long run. And that's one thing that, we've really learned in Louisville and we've really embraced. So, cool. Well, thank you very much for your time and patience.